I watched my name disappear from company documents I helped build. As if my years of sacrifice never mattered, she thought removal meant silence. But power never stays hidden forever. When the shareholders asked one simple question, the truth surfaced and control slipped from her hands permanently. Please take a moment to subscribe to Nillavoices, where unheard stories finally find a voice. Your support keeps these stories alive, and your presence here truly matters. My name is Emery, and the moment I realized I no longer existed inside the company I helped build arrived without warning, without confrontation, and without even the courtesy of honesty. Can you review the updated filings before we submit them? My sister asked casually over the phone, her tone smooth, practiced, and completely unaware of the damage she had already done. Of course, I replied, trusting her the way I always had, because trusting her had become a habit I never questioned. When the documents arrived in my email, I opened them with the same routine confidence I had carried for years, scanning line after line until my eyes stopped moving altogether. My name was not there. I scrolled back up, convinced I had missed something obvious, something small, something explainable, but every page confirmed the same impossible truth. The company existed, the leadership existed, the ownership existed. I did not. This is not right. I whispered to myself, my hands beginning to shake as I reread the paperwork slowly, deliberately, desperately. I called my sister immediately. Where is my name? I asked, skipping every greeting and pretense. There was a pause that lasted just long enough to feel intentional. What do you mean? She replied lightly. I mean my name is missing from the ownership documents, I said, my voice tightening. It was there before, she sighed, as if I had inconvenienced her with something trivial. We made some adjustments, she said. It was necessary for efficiency. Necessary for whom? I asked. For the company, she replied. You are being emotional about this? I felt my chest tighten, not just from shock, but from recognition, because she had used that word before whenever I questioned anything that threatened her control. You removed me without telling me, I said slowly. That is not an adjustment, that is erasure. You were never officially involved the way you think you were, she responded. You helped, yes. But this is business. I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because the audacity of her words left me unsteady. I worked unpaid for years, I reminded her. I managed clients, I handled operations, I carried this company while you presented it. You agreed to that, she said quickly. You never asked for ownership, because you promised security. I replied, you promised partnership. That was informal, she said. Things change. I ended the call before my voice could betray how deeply I was shaking. I drove to my parents' house that evening, carrying printed copies of the documents in my bag like evidence. I could not emotionally set down. My mother looked up when I entered. You look upset, she said gently. I was removed from the company, I replied. My father frowned. Removed how? I laid the papers on the table. She took my name out, I said, completely. My mother picked up the pages, scanning them slowly. I am sure this is a misunderstanding, she said. Your sister would not do something like that intentionally. She already admitted it, I replied. She said it was necessary. My father cleared his throat. She handles the business side now. I handled it when no one else would, I said. I handled it when there was no salary, no recognition, and no security. Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. We did not know, my mother finally said. You did not ask, I replied quietly. As I drove home later that night, memories surfaced without invitation. I remembered sleeping in my office chair because deadlines mattered more than rest. I remembered saying, I do not need payment now, because I believed in what we were building. I remembered my sister saying, your loyalty means everything to me. Loyalty, that word burned now. Back in my apartment, I spread the documents across my kitchen table and stared at them, until the shock gave way to something heavier. Humiliation. This was not an oversight. This was strategic. She had waited until the company was stable, until investors were confident, until my usefulness no longer required acknowledgement. I picked up the paperwork, my hands steady now, and whispered aloud, you did not just remove my name, you tried to silence my history. And in that moment, holding proof of my own erasure, I understood something that changed everything. This was never just business. This was betrayal. calculated and deliberate, meant to teach me that loyalty without power is disposable. I did not sleep that night because every time I closed my eyes, I heard my sister's voice calmly explaining my erasure as if it were a minor clerical correction, rather than an intentional removal of my identity. The next morning, I called her again, not because I expected honesty, but because silence was beginning to feel like surrender. "We need to talk," I said the moment she answered. "I already explained everything," she replied impatiently. "I do not understand why you are still upset." "Because you removed my name without consent," I said carefully. "That is not something people simply move past. You are reacting emotionally," she said. "This was a temporary restructuring." "Temporary for whom?" I asked. "My name is gone from legal documents. You were never officially positioned the way you imagined," she replied. "You helped because you wanted to. I helped because you promised partnership," I said. "You promised security," she laughed softly. "You always remember conversations in a way that benefits you." That sentence landed harder than the removal itself. "So now I am rewriting history?" I asked. "You tend to romanticize your role," she replied. "You were supportive, not essential." I ended the call shaking, not from anger, but from the slow realization that she was not confused about what she did. She was confident I would doubt myself enough to accept it. Later that afternoon, I visited my parents again, hoping for clarity and finding only careful avoidance. "Your sister says this is business," my father said cautiously. "You should not take it personally." "How could I not?" I asked. "My name disappeared. Companies change," my mother added gently. "You should not attach your identity to it." "I did not attach my identity," I replied. "I attached my labor, my time, and my unpaid years." My father sighed. "You were always willing to help." "Yes," I said quietly, "and that is why this was possible." That evening, I received a call from Daniel, a senior employee who had been with the company almost as long as I had. "I heard you stepped back," he said. "I was removed." I corrected him. There was a pause. "I thought you agreed to it." "Why would you think that?" I asked. "Because your sister said it was discussed," he replied. "She said everyone understood." "Everyone except me," I said. Daniel hesitated. "There were meetings you were not part of." That sentence confirmed what my heart already knew. "They planned it," I said. "I assumed you were okay with it," he replied. "You never objected before." I hung up and sat on my couch, staring at the wall as tears finally escaped without permission. That night, I cried until my chest ached, whispering questions into the quiet. Why did I accept so little? Why did I believe promises without protection? Why did loyalty feel safer than boundaries? I replayed conversations where I said, "It is fine," when it was not. I remembered smiling through exhaustion, convincing myself that patience would eventually be rewarded. The next day, I met with Margaret, a longtime family advisor who had known us since the company's earliest days. "I was surprised not to see your name," she said casually, "but your sister explained it." "What did she explain?" I asked. "That you were emotionally overwhelmed and preferred to step away," Margaret replied. I felt my stomach drop. "That is not true," I said. Margaret looked uncomfortable. "I thought you supported the decision." "I was never asked," I replied. That conversation stayed with me long after it ended, because it revealed something painful and undeniable. My silence had been translated into consent. My trust had been reframed as weakness. My loyalty had been weaponized against me. That night, alone in my apartment, I sat on the floor and whispered aloud. They did not misunderstand me. They relied on my predictability. For the first time, I stopped asking what I did wrong and started asking a different question. Who benefits from me doubting myself? The answer was immediate and devastating. I was not removed because I lacked value. I was removed because my value was inconvenient once it no longer required acknowledgement. And in that realization, painful as it was, something inside me shifted quietly. I was still broken, still grieving, still questioning, but I was no longer confused. The problem had never been my competence. It had always been their need to control without accountability. I did not announce my departure, because explaining myself had only ever invited more manipulation, and I finally understood that silence could be stronger than justification. I simply stopped showing up. My phone rang the first morning. I did not respond to company messages. "Are you sick?" My sister asked sharply. We have deadlines. I am unavailable, I replied calmly. That is not an answer, she said. You cannot just disappear. I already did, I answered. You just noticed now, she scoffed. You are trying to make a point. I am making a boundary, I replied. And I ended the call before she could reshape my words. Later that day, my friend Hannah came over, watching me pack documents into a folder with deliberate care. You look steady, she said, not calm but certain. I'm tired of proving my worth to people who profit from my exhaustion, I replied. That company taught you to confuse loyalty with sacrifice, she said. Walking away does not mean you lost. It feels like I'm finally breathing. I admitted. That week, I met with Richard, a mentor who had guided me quietly for years but never interfered unless invited. You stepped back, he said, studying my face. I removed myself before they could define the narrative further. I replied, that is strategic. He said, not emotional. They always called me emotional, I said. Because emotional people are easier to dismiss. He replied, prepared people are harder to control. His words stayed with me as I stopped reacting and started observing. Emails continued arriving, increasingly urgent, increasingly confused. Can you clarify your role? Are you still involved? Who is handling operations now? I did not answer immediately. Instead, I reread old emails I had saved without realizing why. Messages filled with promises and assurances that contradicted everything my sister claimed. You are essential, one message read. We cannot move forward without you. Another confirmed, your position is secure, repeated again and again. I forwarded nothing. I waited. Then Daniel called again. Things are tense, he admitted. People are asking questions. What kind of questions? I asked. About why the company changed structure so suddenly, he replied. And why you are no longer listed. What are they being told? I asked. That you chose to step back, he said hesitantly. And do you believe that? I asked. There was a pause. Not anymore, he replied. A few days later, I received a message from a minority shareholder I barely knew. I hope you're well, the message read. Your absence has raised concerns. I stared at the screen, realizing my silence had begun speaking on my behalf. At home, alone, I felt the weight of what I was doing settle fully into my chest. I questioned myself late at night, pacing slowly, whispering doubts into the quiet. What if I am overreacting? What if walking away proves them right? What if I lose everything? Then I asked a different question. What if staying already cost me everything? That thought grounded me. I enrolled in courses I had postponed for years. I reviewed financial frameworks I once managed without recognition. I rebuilt confidence, not through revenge, but through preparation. One evening, my sister called again, her voice tighter than before. People are confused, she said. Your silence is causing disruption. That is not my responsibility, I replied. You are damaging the company, she said. No, I corrected her. The company is responding to unanswered questions. You could fix this, she insisted. You just need to clarify things. I spent years clarifying myself, I said. This time, I'm letting truth surface naturally, she exhaled. Sharply, you think you have power now? I have always had power, I replied. I just stopped handing it to you. The line went quiet. A message arrived the following evening from an unknown number. This is becoming an issue. At the top it read, we need to understand why foundational roles changed without documentation. I sat on my couch, phone in my hand, heart steady, mind clear. For the first time, I was not reacting to chaos. I was watching it unfold. My absence had disrupted comfort, challenged assumptions, and forced scrutiny where silence once protected manipulation. I did not feel victorious. I felt aligned. And as I set my phone down, I whispered something that finally felt true. I did not walk away because I was weak. I walked away because I was ready, and somewhere beyond my quiet apartment, questions were being asked that could no longer be controlled. I did not attend the shareholder meeting with expectations of justice, revenge, or emotional satisfaction, because by that point I had already accepted that truth does not need permission to surface. When silence has done its work properly, I joined the meeting remotely, my camera off, my microphone muted, listening as familiar voices filled the virtual room. We will begin with updates on leadership alignment, the chairperson announced calmly. My sister spoke with confidence, her voice steady in the way it always became when she believed she was in control. The restructuring was necessary for operational clarity, she said. All decisions were aligned internally. Then a voice I did not recognize interrupted gently. I have a question, the man said. Can someone explain why the original operational lead is no longer listed in any official capacity? The room went quiet. My heart slowed instead of racing, because I recognized the moment for what it was. A crack. My sister cleared her throat. That role evolved, she replied. She chose to step away. Another voice followed, older, firmer. Do we have written confirmation of that choice? The voice asked. I leaned closer to my screen, my hands resting calmly in my lap. There was an understanding, my sister replied. An understanding requires documentation. The voice responded, especially when foundational roles are altered. My sister hesitated. I would need to review our internal records, she said. Daniel spoke next. There are emails, he said carefully, that describe her role as essential and permanent. Another shareholder added, I remember presentations where her contributions were highlighted. My sister's voice tightened. That does not equate to ownership. Silence followed again. Heavier this time, a woman spoke softly. Ownership aside, removal without consent raises governance concerns. My sister replied defensively. She was emotional and overwhelmed. I whispered to myself, there it is. Recognizing the pattern she had relied on for years, the chairperson spoke again. Personal assessments do not replace procedural accountability. I finally unmuted my microphone. I never chose to leave, I said calmly. And I never consented to being removed. The room shifted instantly. My sister's voice rose. You said you were unavailable. I said I was unavailable after my name was erased, I replied. Those events did not occur in the order you keep presenting, the chairperson asked. Do you have evidence of your involvement? Yes, I replied. And more importantly, there is evidence of decisions made without my knowledge. Documents appeared on the shared screen, emails I had quietly preserved. Timelines that spoke without emotion. My sister interrupted. You are doing this out of spite. No, I replied evenly. I am answering questions honestly. The chairperson nodded. Intent matters less than process here. As the discussion continued, I said very little, because I no longer needed to explain myself. Truth was finally doing what it always does when allowed space. My sister spoke again, her voice quieter now. I did not think this would escalate, she admitted. That is because you believe silence meant consent, I replied. The meeting concluded with a request for review, legal oversight, and temporary suspension of decision-making authority. After the call ended, my sister called me immediately. You humiliated me, she said. I did not speak until asked, I replied. That is not humiliation, that is accountability. You could have protected me, she said. I protected myself, I answered. For the first time, she was silent. I never meant to erase you, she said finally. You did, I replied, and now you are facing the consequences of that choice. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, not celebrating, not grieving, but breathing with a clarity I had not felt in years. I looked at my reflection and said aloud, my name was never the problem. I did not return to the company. I did not ask for restoration. I chose something stronger. I chose myself without negotiation. Losing my name from those documents forced me to reclaim it internally, without titles, without permission, and without apology. I understood then that survival does not always look like fighting. Sometimes survival looks like walking away, standing still, and allowing truth to rise where control once lived. And that realization gave me peace I never found in approval, because I was never powerless. I was simply waiting to stop explaining my worth to people who benefited from misunderstanding it.